So, from a legislative overview, as glad Senator Sullivan was here. Passing the IUU bill was definitely a really big accomplishment for all of us. We've been working on it for a while, and so we're glad to get that done. And I think it was just a great accomplishment for everyone involved. Magnuson-Stevens bill the authorization has lapsed, and so there's certainly some interest in revisiting that. The last reauthorization was really comprehensive, very extensive, and I don't think there's any appetite at all to revisit it at that level. I'll say we hear an awful lot of people who are interested in not revisiting it at all, which is fine, but I think from a good governance perspective, it is good to reauthorize bills that have lapsed so they can stay current and so we don't end up stuck in a situation like we are with the Endangered Species Act or the Marine Mammal Protection Act where, essentially they're locked down in stone and there's so much ill will on either side of it that you really can't get anything done, even if an awful lot of people think on those acts at least minor tweaks would be of benefit. So to the extent that there is interest in revisiting the MSA, it would be a modest tweak at most. And I think there's, I would like to see the Senate put together a counteroffer to the House bill, because realistically, if we don't, we will be asked to just take the House bill and pass it as is. So, the voices that say don't put forward anything, eventually that could backfire on us. So we would like to move towards a productive, bipartisan, modest reauthorization. Well, I would. You'll probably hear an awful lot of people say they would like to see nothing. So, but that's certainly my goal. With respect to resilient fisheries, I think, an awful lot of that work occurs at the NOAA and council level. And so what I haven't seen yet, and I actually, I tend to like to listen more than talk on these issues, is I haven't seen legislative proposals that make a lot of sense that we could pass along to NOAA and the councils without it being burdensome, without it slowing down the work they're already doing. So, we're always all ears, but it's my sense that to a large extent, increasing resiliency in our fisheries is, it is not right for a legislative mandate. I think, and that's also true because how that gets implemented will have a very different regional flavor, and the councils are ideally set up to deal with those regional problems without a national one-size-fits-all solution. I think if there is an interest in looking into a legislative solution to resilient fisheries, something we would be particularly interested in is making sure that that answer is more nuanced than just always leaving more fish in the water, which is certainly, on some level, the easiest answer to creating a more resilient fishery, or at least the most simple. But, there's a question of how do you increase the resiliency of a community as you also increase the resilience of a fishery. And there's a real tension there with how MSA is structured with the council process. And, the councils it's an excellent, they do their public process, they do their outreach, it's a very deliberative process, but ultimately it's really slow. And that is both their strength and their weakness. And it is hard for them to react in a nimble way to changing fishery conditions. And, it's hard for them to react in a positive, increased fishing quota way. It's relatively easy for them to close a fishery, but if it suddenly seems like there's more fish than they're expecting, it's hard for them to open up for more fishing quickly, and that can have devastating impacts on a community. So there's recently this I'm just learning about this fish called cobia, so probably you'll all hear lots about it, or everyone knows more about it than me. But last year, and it's a sport fish. Well, it's a recreationally sought after fish in the Atlantic. And last year's catch was in Virginia and North Carolina was much higher than expected, even with the same amount of fishing effort. And so they exceeded their ACL, and this year, as a consequence, they essentially have no season. Now, there's some question of why was that catch so much higher? So it possibly was that there was indeed more fish, or that, it was actually not a great data point, and so the catch was not in fact higher. But the consequence still is that the fishery is closed for these businesses, and they have an entire year of lost income. And so the council process is just unable to address these questions quickly enough, and so it's a kind of difficult situation as to how you can enable the councils to react responsibly and potentially allow fishing in this situation. You certainly don't want to overfish, but if people lose a year's worth of business, their business has gone out of business, and that is then, it's not just a year's lost income for them, it's possibly their entire lifetime's lost income on that business. So I think that's a real challenge going forward, and something that we're certainly interested in hearing solutions on. I think one of the other challenges with resilient fisheries is what does our catch share regime look like if we do have massively migrating fisheries? And how does that get sussed out on a community level? Somebody is invested in quota that they expect to fish from their hometown in their historic fishing grounds, and suddenly those fish are no longer there. Now is their quota worthless, or, and maybe it is just they sell it to the next town north, but to the extent that we're looking to preserve historic fishing communities, having this quantity, or having your quota no longer be worth anything in your hometown, I just think it's something that, we need to start looking at for the future, and I don't have any solutions for how to deal with that, but I think it will be a problem that an awful lot of people will be seeing. And, on some level, catch shares have enabled us to have very sustainable, profitable fisheries, but, we need that entire system to also be nimble going forward. So, with respect to other issues to enhance resilience fisheries, I do want to say that the NOAA's National Standard 1 revisions, I think, have gone an awful long way in both addressing the problems of creating how you simultaneously create a more resilient fishery and a more resilient fishing community. And I think they've been thoughtfully done. And, on some level, that has addressed a lot of the issues that I think there would have been legislative interest to tackle. So that's, as those changes get implemented, that will be great, and less disruptive than perhaps legislating on that topic would have been. So that is all I have, and no, I take it.